So what are the features of the barrier islands? Okay, I said there is a wave process associated with them which produces the barrier in the first place. So it has a features going from the ocean side to the land side, and remember it's a barrier island because it's produced a little lagoon behind it, right? So it has the ocean beach towards the marine side. It's closest part of the island to the ocean, and it has a dune, which is a deposition of the wave energy, sand being accumulated. On top of that, it has what is called a barrier flat, where birds can come in and put seeds and so on. Typically a grassy area that forms just behind the dunes on the wind shadow, you can think of it as. And below the barrier flat you get salt marshes, a high salt marsh and a low salt marsh. Again, these are typical expected features, not always exactly the way they are found everywhere. So here is the ocean where energy is coming in. It's got certain characteristics which produce the barrier island. So as we remember, these are depositional, so wave energy is typically lighter, except when you get a hurricane or a storm and so on. So you have swash and backwash happening and producing this nice ocean beach, and you have a dune which is depositing the sand with the winds, storms over time and so on. Behind that you get a barrier flat, and you get a high salt marsh and a low salt marsh and the lagoon on the other side. Okay, these are the typical expected features. Okay, so then what happens if you leave it alone and don't colonize it and just let the natural processes do their work? It turns out that these vegetation, the photosynthesis that is producing carbohydrates, if they somehow get buried and they don't get respired. Remember, we have photosynthesis producing carbohydrate and respiration using the carbohydrates and producing CO2 back. So oxygen produced during photosynthesis and oxygen consumed and CO2 produced during respiration. If you hide away that carbohydrates and they are not respired, then you begin to form what is shown here as the peat bed. It's basically the organic matter that's not been consumed by aerobic bacteria or some other heterotroph which would consume the carbohydrate produced by the plant, or the plant itself didn't live out to respire and die. Okay, so the peat bed typically occurs because of the production. How did it produce all the way here? Because over time this thing rolls over itself. Okay, so here you have the original profile. The ocean was here, you had the beach and the barrier flat and the high salt marsh, low salt marsh and so on into the lagoon. Over time the erosion happens and the sand gets moved over, and you can see this has moved towards land, and erosion has happened on this side, so the barrier island is rolling over itself. So it's burying that photosynthesized material that falls into the water. Okay, so it keeps rolling over and joins the mainland and becomes part of the mainland, and new barrier island forms as the wave energy continues to bring in sand and create this dynamic. Okay, so if you don't do anything, if humans don't perturb the system, this is typically how it should go. The barrier islands should roll over themselves and produce peat beds under them. Why are they important? Because this is a natural process of carbon sequestration. Remember, we are putting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere and we want it taken out. Any carbon you bury like this, and that'll remain under for a long time. The fossil fuels are from hundreds of millions of years ago that we are taking out and burning. So any process that puts back in for geologic times is a good thing because it's taking it away from the atmosphere. That's why the natural process of barrier island are important, and the humans perturb them by building concrete structures on them. It's dangerous already because it's just a sand island, has hardened over time by biology and compacting and so on, and you're building on top, which means the erosion is not going to be small, right? So they are basically vulnerable regions to build on, and there are many places where the structures have to be abandoned because they are just eroding too fast and dangerous.